Welcome to this edition of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast, where we talk about topics and resources that help you lead more to reach more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this edition of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. My name's Tom Bump, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining me, my friends. I am looking forward to this episode. And I got to ask a question right out of the gate. Have you ever wished you had some pixie dust to solve all your kids' ministry challenges? I mean, seriously. No, I'm not talking about glitter, Satan's snot. No, we're not doing glitter. We're talking pixie dust. I know. You're thinking, Tom, maybe you got some pixie dust in your brain. Maybe I do, but I have something I really do believe is going to help you all. And it's not real pixie dust, but it is a great resource, a great book that I believe will help you stir some of that creativity, bring back some of that passion and excitement to get you to think about what could be and just move past some of the limitations that sometimes we get caught in. My guest today has created a great book, written a great book that's going to help ministry leaders find that inspiration and push through the challenges and get some new perspective, because children's ministry leadership has changed and the way we're doing things should change. And if we're doing things the way we've always done it, we're stuck. And I think this book is going to help. And we've just spent like over an hour talking off air. Again, I'm going to say it like I always do. I should have hit record probably, and we could have been talking some of it anyway. Some of it was just us catching up. So you wouldn't want to heard that anyway. This is going to be fun. Justyn Smith, welcome to the Kids Ministry Collective, man.
Oh, thank you so much, Tom. So good to be here. Finally.
Yes, I know. Because I think we talked about this a long time ago and then didn't make it happen. Actually, your first book, I think we kind of talked about it.
I think it's my fault. So yeah.
Well, it's all right. I got Dale on, and we'll talk about what the first book was, I'm sure. But Justyn, tell my listeners a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in ministry in some capacity for probably going on 24 years now. And most of that's been in the next gen ministry space. So I've been started off in youth ministry, and God called me up to the ranks of being a children's pastor. So I did children's ministry as well for many years. And I've done both. And so I've done, in a family ministry role or next gen role at some of the places that I've worked at. And where I've found the most, I guess, satisfaction or joy, I guess, in
Yeah.
serving the local church has been in children's ministry. And I can recall a long time ago, always thought I was going to be in youth ministry specifically. And when I finally went to kids ministry, I was a little reluctant to do it. And after having done it for a year or so, I actually had an opportunity. Do you want to keep doing youth ministry or kids ministry? Do one or the other? And if that question would have been asked from me a year before, I would have been youth ministry. But after a year of doing kids ministry, I was like, I want to stay in kids ministry. Kind of surprised myself, but
Yeah.
I just absolutely loved it. I loved the creativity behind it. I loved just, being able to shape young minds and uh, build into them at the ground level versus having to, wait for the, imagine a building being built and having to, redo all the construction after it's already
Yeah.
built. It just seemed easier to start the foundation. And so, yeah, I absolutely love kids ministry. So I've been doing that in some capacity for, like I said, over 20 years. And still do that. So I'm not on a church staff right now, but I do some coaching I have an LLC called Kidmin Magic. And so I work with churches of all shapes and sizes, typically honing in on the kids ministry part and just helping them with strategy, with creativity, multi-site questions, whatever it is that they need. I like to lean in and come alongside them and just help them be better. And then what I also do is I work with an organization called Storyland Studios. Storyland Studios really is a company that helps churches, helps people tell their stories better. So we like to say stories that lift the spirit is really kind of our mantra. And what we do is we do it in a lot of different capacities. And so we help people with their strategic, spatial, or digital storytelling. So a lot of it has to do with brand design, story that walks away with you, design you step into. So, man, you're probably in kids ministry if you're or involved in kids ministry in some way if you're listening to this. And so, any of those theme spaces that you walk into, some of those fancy churches or whatnot, we do that type of work, and then design that you interact with. So AR, VR,
Wow.
virtual websites, all those types of things we work with, and we work with companies as large as the Walt Disney Company, Legoland, Merlin Entertainment, to a church plant that's just starting out and trying to figure out what to do and what to
Yeah.
order and how to create things. So really, it's a big spectrum, and I love that because I just have always had this entrepreneurial, like, creative bent about me, and so through Plain Joe Studios, I'm able to leverage, I feel like, that gift that God's given
Yeah.
me to help churches be the best they can be. So that's what I've been up to.
Oh, man, that is so cool. That is so cool. And, and one of his passions is storytelling, and that's
Yeah,
why this you're gonna love getting your hands on this book, which we're gonna talk about, 'cause I wanted our listeners to hear, about this, and so, Justin, we always start the podcast off with a why question, and
perfect.
so here comes your why question. So, why write a book called Kidmin, Trust, and Pixie Dust? Because the title caught me right away. I'm like, "Okay, I wanna know what's the why behind this. What's the story behind this book?"
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is just my 2 things. One is, I mean, I love children's ministry, absolutely love it, and I've devoted much of my life to it. And the other part is I've just always had this passion, this fascination with Walt Disney and the Walt Disney
Mhm.
Company. And I think I'll say that obviously I don't agree with all the things the Walt Disney Company does,
Sure.
and maybe even some
Yep.
more recent decisions or policies that they've put in place. I don't line up with everything they do, but there's no doubt that there's tons of things that you can take from, learn
Yeah.
from the company,
Mhm.
especially kind of that the vintage Walt Disney. You think of Walt Disney the man and just how the company started. So
Mhm.
I really do. I love the historical part of it. It's part of the reason why I like Disneyland more than Walt Disney World. Is I like the park that Walt Disney actually built, and this the history behind it
Yeah.
is pretty fun for me. And so, really, the book, I mean, I- I'm not here to talk about it, but I mean, there's the first book, If Disney Ran Your Children's Ministry, just a real practical book that a couple friends and I wrote, put together, which was fun. Very, yeah, like I said, very practical. But then Kidman Trust and Pixie Dust, again, came from, I just knew there was more to talk about. There's more stories. There's just more that you can pull from. It's just some of the, especially the past leadership from the Walt Disney Company, and I wanted to put those 2 things together. I know there's enough leaders in the children's ministry, next gen space that have an appreciation for Disney
Yeah.
and what they've accomplished, and, I mean, you just think about all the crossover between church and Disney, just reaching families,
Yep.
the combination of entertainment and educating, so the
Right.
edutainment part of it and how we teach kids. I mean, because that is a reality, a big part of it, and they do well at that. There's a lot of great crossovers. So I just yeah, so I was like, I wanna put this in writing. I want people to have these thoughts. So Kidman Trust and Pixie Dust is just about kinda leaning into what, you call the magic. I'll put that in quotation marks, and not all of us
Yeah.
believe in real magic, but, the magic of Disney, and
Yeah.
what does that look like in a kids ministry context? And so just tried to take some of the stories and those leadership principles and just make it relatable for people. So
Yeah. And looking through the book, and I agree, yeah. I mean, we said this off air, I'll say it on air, is that yeah, while I don't agree with the current structure and some of the things that they've done, if you go back to the old school, there's a lot we can in the
yeah.
church redeem, right? We can
Yep.
redeem principles, and there's a lot to learn, and I'm always telling some of the people that I've coached, grab some of these books that are written by some of the Disney people and
Yes.
say, "How can I do this?" I've told people, "Hey, if you wanna stir creativity, go to an amusement park," or, I used to say go to Chuck E. Cheese when it was a safe place to go to. I wouldn't recommend it nowadays, but you might lose your life over a pizza and
Right.
a ticket, but skee ball ticket, but there's something about going into a Disney park or being around the Disney and just thinking through some of the way he told stories, the way he created environments, And yeah, the other book, and we'll definitely put a link in the show notes too, because it did help stir some of my thinking even creatively about how was I telling the greatest story ever written?
Right.
How am I helping children see the amazing God that we serve and how much he loves them? And so I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a ton of principles that transfer that we can redeem. So give us a 30,000-foot view. We'll dive into some finer points, but give me a how's the book set up and give me a better idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, the title just came from I just wanted something clever that just spoke to the nostalgic part of Disney, the nostalgia of it, so Kidmin Trust and Pixie Dust, just a spin-off of the quote in Peter Pan. Yeah, and so that's where I got that from, and then, yeah, the 30,000, uh, point of view perspective of the book is what I did was I really it's been just over, a decade or so of just thoughts and inspiration and research and just collecting articles, reading articles, all those types of things. And just over the years, I've written a lot just through blog posts or through articles for magazines, or et cetera. And in some circles, kind of known as a Disney guy in kids ministry space. And so I really just kind of put all those thoughts together in this book and expounded on some because some of those posts that I did were
Mm,
pretty short, and so added some stories, etc. And they really kind of center around Walt Disney and some of his leadership philosophy. One of his right hand man, Marty Sklar, who really just recently passed away, I think in the past couple 2 3 years,
yeah.
and then just thoughts and some extra thoughts on from some Imagineers, etc. So it's about really helping people in their leadership. It's helping to spark some creativity. It's especially with the Marty Sklar and his 10 commandments, which I really like. And he's actually got a whole, I think, a book, or there's a section on that he goes into depth about that. But I really enjoy that because I'm a practical guy, and there's a lot of amazing, spiritually deep and rich children's ministry next gen books out there that you need to read. But I'm also a guy, like, I just want give me some nuts and bolts, give me
Yeah.
some inspiration, some practical ideas. I feel like this book takes those Disney principles and does just that. It just kinda brings it down to a level that, "Oh, man, I could do that." Or you might be reading some of this and be like, "I can't believe, like, I knew that." And if you're like me, I'll read a book sometimes and I'm just thinking, so sometimes there's things that I don't know, and I'm like, "Man, that's amazing," and it just blows my mind. But then there's some things I'm reading, I'm like, I knew that, but it just took someone to say it in a way
Right.
where it just, flips the switch on,
Yeah.
and then just gives me the motivation to actually do it. And so I believe that's what this book will do. So it'll reach people who have been in ministry for a long time, and it'll definitely help those who are just getting started in ministry.
Yeah. And I loved the format. You wrote this.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Well, that's all right. No, not as a devotional because we were joking about that
Right.
offline. Is you've got 31 days, and what I told you from what I loved about the book myself was the little daily thing of saying, all right, I'm gonna read this and then I'm gonna let it marinate. I'm gonna
Yeah,
think about this. And you gave some questions even for me to be thinking about, and I'm like, okay, I could apply this. I could take this one, and I think this is gonna be one of those books that people are gonna walk away with more than 31 nuggets that
sure.
they can use, because I think the questions that you've put into it is gonna lead to more discussions for their teams for sure, and so I loved that. So you wrote this built around the framework. I'm curious, as you were researching and writing these posts and then putting together this book, what's one of the big takeaways that you took from ministry, and how do you think it would impact children's ministry? If there was one big thing in this book, what it might be?
I think one of the big things I just really have always admired about Disney in general, and it has nothing to do with money, although people will correlate it to a dollar amount pretty quickly, is just their excellence factor. And
Mm,
every time I read about Disney, every time, there's an interview I read or do article, I find online, it it just always kinda comes back to excellence and how much effort that they put into what they do to make to give you that, again, I'll use the word that magical feeling because you don't know really what word I use, so you say magic because sometimes it feels like that, and it's because of just the excellence that they leverage, and I would say excellence the reason why people say dollar amount, because I think when you say that, people will say, "Well, if I had that much money, of course I could dot, dot, dot."
Right, right.
And I'm like, "Well, sure," and no doubt I've worked for churches where, I've had, hundreds of thousands of dollars just to play with, and some people that'll blow their minds like, "What?" But I've also worked for churches where the budget that we have is the money that I make from my other part-time job,
Yeah,
because there is no
right.
budget. And
Yeah.
and I felt like the excellence in both those situations were still great because excellence to me
Mm.
is and from what I can tell, even just through the interviews and things I read from Disney, is it's just really doing the best you can with what you have.
Yeah.
And
Wow, that's
that's
good.
what I love. And so when you read stories about Disney of how they kind of, when I think about when California Adventure was first built, they really did it on the cheap, and because they did it on the cheap, it was like a half-day park at best that people would spend time at, and people did not have a great impression of what they didn't really have the magic, didn't have because they really skimped on all the things that makes Disney, Disney to really just save a few bucks. Because the reality is
Right.
they had the money, and they had just invested heavily into other theme parks, but for that park, they just really skimped out, I think, just to try to make a few cheap dollars. And, we know what leadership learned later is that, or what they corrected, was they put the billions back into the park to turn it around, and really it really made a difference. So people, they love the park because they spent time telling the story. Story is a big deal with me. No, that's another thing. Obviously, how can you get away from story? But excellence the reason why excellence still probably pops up just above telling story is because they do an excellent job at telling story. And that's just kind of what they do in everything that they do. So, yeah, it's a big deal, and I think as you read through this book, you'll catch that. It comes up. It's maybe a
Yeah.
little repetitive because, again, I wrote the book not intentionally, to be like this 31-day journey, for someone. It just turned out that way, and but so there's a few repetitive themes in there, and I think you'll see that the storytelling and the excellence factor through there.
Wait. Oh, it is so good to be thinking about that because again, there's some of the principle of be diligent with what you have, and that excellence can mean just a little extra, here and there. It doesn't, and you're right. I think people have got to, especially if you struggle with a scarcity mindset,
Mhm.
that you think I have to have budget money to make excellence. Excellence can be about how your volunteers greet somebody at the door. Excellence can be how, when you're teaching creatively, not just lecturing, but you're
Yep.
telling the story in a way that really emphasizes the gospel and draws it out in a way that sticks with children to create that memory so that it's more than just a fun experience on Sunday morning. So excellence, yeah. I'm glad you said, but I'm also glad you told the story a little bit about that because I think that's interesting how sometimes when you do stuff and you try to cut the corner
Yeah,
because you're afraid to spend the money, what happens? Well, for Disney, they failed forward, right?
absolutely. Yep.
And I think that's kinda cool because that leads us right into the next question, perfect segue. Like we planned this, but we didn't. But we did, but we didn't, I guess. But you talked about that whole idea of embracing failure in how when we learn from our failures, it nurtures resilience in children's ministry. I'd like you to unpack that a little bit because I think so many leaders today are scared of failing because they think it's a death sentence, a job sentence, and they're scared to fail.
Mm,
So talk about that because I liked this was like day 3 in the first chapter, so to speak,
right.
and it was like, boom, I thought it was some great truth there.
Yeah, I know in the chapter I kinda talk it's probably a couple ways of failing. One is, like, it's creating a space for kids to understand that they can fail. In some
Mhm.
ways, really, like, allowing a kid to be a kid because and I say that because I think sometimes aren't we don't think about it, and so we're not really intentional, but we will be quick to correct, quick to, put kids on, on this track and just, run and go this direction where it's like, I think that we need to provide spaces where kids can fail and learn, and that's okay. And instead of, kind of demanding this perfection, like you got to come in. I don't think we intentionally do it, but I think it's part of the challenge is that we
Yeah.
don't have a lot of intention in it. So I know the chapter speaks to some of that, but the chapter also speaks to leadership and failure. And this is a hard one because sometimes it's not always, and I can't recall. Sorry if I spoke exactly to it in this book, but it's not always in your control on the failure part. And I think that's what freezes leaders up. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is, while it's easy for me to say it's okay to fail and you should be, and what I really believe is you should be failing. If you're not failing, you're not stretching yourself. You're
Yeah.
not trying anything new because if you're succeeding at everything you do, er, I mean, Y I don't know, you're a prodigy, you're like, I don't know, Jesus is like, I don't know, you're Jesus. Because
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that
I want you to coach me.
that you're trying something new and you're just perfecting it every time you do it, and you're just
Yeah.
knocking out of the park. I'm like, "Hey, that'd be challenging." There's no doubt you might try something new a first time and do well, but man, to consistently do that,
Yeah.
I just would challenge that a little bit, and so I think there should I it's you should expect failure, and I think what freezes people up is that although we might believe that. Do our leaders believe that? Do the people that we report to, do they share that same mindset? And one of the questions I always ask before I go even into a church, and I've worked at a handful of them, is it safe to fail here? And I let them
Mm,
know that. Right off the bat, I let
that's
them know,
good.
listen, I'm going to fail at something. And in fact, if you don't allow me to fail, I'm not your guy. And so just right off the bat, they know that I'm gonna take some chances, and I wanna know they failed too. I wanna know that this is a safe place. And so I'm not
Right.
saying it's a place where I'm gonna come in, just mess everything up and leave a big train wreck and bodies behind me as I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about is this a space where we can do something new to reach people that need Jesus, to reach families, to reach kids, because R I mean, obviously, the way we're doing it is not the way you wanna do it, or else you wouldn't have hired me. So you wanna do something differently. You see something that's different. If you want the status quo, then you would have stuck with the same person. And so for if you're not sure about that up front, though, it can be scary, and I think that's what causes us to freeze and to
Mm,
hesitate with failure is because now we're not sure. Is our leader gonna be okay with us failing? And so I just encourage people, if you don't know, have that conversation next time you have a one-on-one or next time you have an opportunity. Every church is structured different, so not everyone gets access to everyone, but whoever you report to, do I have permission to fail? And what you basically do I have permission to try something new? And if it doesn't work, we're gonna learn from it and tweak it, do something different. And obviously, you don't wanna fail the same thing over and over again. That's not failing forward, that's not learning, that's just chaos. I don't know. But yeah, but failing, to me is a good thing. In fact, people that have worked for me, man, if you have not failed at something, I'm just like, "Are you even trying?" And so to me, it's an example of great leadership. It's an example of risk taking, which I think is important,
mm,
and just
that's good.
expanding, the gifts that God's given you, and maybe even learning something. Maybe there's a trait, something you don't feel comfortable with. Try something new, and so take the chance of failing, and I think that's
Ooh,
great.
that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So later, I mean, yeah, it was hard for me to pick sections to talk about because I was like, I want to talk about this one. I want to talk about this one. I want to talk about, but then I'm like, well, people just need to read the book. They just need to
There
go
you go.
get it. Because seriously, there's not enough time in the podcast to talk about some of the things I would love to dig into. So we'll probably just have to do another podcast too.
Do it.
That would be fun because I would like to talk more about how you see leaders and what we could do in this what I call the new now, not the new normal, because I still don't think
Right.
we're anywhere close to normal yet. And how some of these principles could cultivate some of the new things that ministry needs to start doing. You know, we created, I mean, there was such innovation during COVID that happened. I saw so many children's leaders creating new things and doing ministry in new ways. And then as soon as, you know, they declare the pandemic basically over, everybody went rushing right back to what we used to do. We're right back to our comfort zones. And I'm like, man, we're missing some of that stuff.
Yep.
I wanna jump into, I am gonna go off script here for a second because
Do it.
I think some of this revolves around leadership and how we lead. And you do a whole section on Disney's blueprint and how, you know, he had some real principles for leadership. And what are a couple things that if you were advising a younger, newer ministry leader, what would be some things that you would say, "Hey, take a look at these principles and use these." You got some for us?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, one of the things that sticks out to me is, I mean, Disney was an innovator, Walt Disney, and I would know, going back to your point of, COVID and the innovation that was there, and then people kind of going back to old habits or old ways of doing things because it's either cheaper or it feels more comfortable. I would encourage younger leaders to continue to innovate. One of the things I was just reading the other day is that if you're not on if you're not on YouTube, you're behind. You're already losing Gen Alpha. And the reality is, I mean, there's not very many kids ministry that are. There's very
Yeah,
few. I mean, you got some large churches who are doing it, but there's not very many who are. And I believe that there's opportunity to leverage that in a way that grabs the minds of young people. And the reason why they say it, because most, I mean, that's where most kids get their entertainment, get their
right.
get their news.
Yeah.
My kids prefer YouTube over cable, over,
Yeah.
over Disney Plus or Netflix or anything like that. They prefer YouTube. They enjoy what it has to offer. And so
Yep.
it was great during, I think, during COVID, where, I mean, there were maybe churches were forced to, whatever, but some of these kids ministries, small kids ministries, with maybe don't have the tens of thousands of dollars to do much, they were being innovative in their way to reach
Yes.
kids. And I just there was just something about that I think was special. And I think as long as you didn't get stuck in, trapped in the comparison trap,
Yeah.
where, I'm comparing, what I'm doing to, this church down or whatever, and, you just worry about the people that God's, the kids and the families that God has, put in your path. I think you'd be fine. But I think sometimes we look at some of these other churches and we're like, "Oh, well, they've got more money. Theirs looks
Right.
better. It sounds
Yep.
better. They've got all these, the bells and whistles and everything." And then it takes off. It just maybe puts us in a spiral of a downward spiral of like, we're not good enough. And yeah. So I think that innovation is a good thing. Sorry, it's kind of weird, little cat there. Innovation is a great thing. I would say that for a young leader, stay stay humble. And we know Walt Disney had some humble roots. I don't know that he was humble the entire time, but he definitely had some humble roots, and he was humbled at times, and he
Yeah.
had some grit, and he kept going. I think just, some of his principles of, and there's the story that people know, he created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and, that his first, kind of main character that was known, and that was kind of sneakily or contractually taken from him by Universal Studios, back in the day. And I think for some people that would have been a blow. For a lot of people that
Yeah.
would have been like, "Let's just pack the bags, go home,
Yeah.
let's just
Game
stop." And
over.
I think that in a lot of churches, there's, some things that happen that are even outside your control. You didn't see it. It wasn't in the interview. When you're interviewing, you're just dating. That's what
Yeah.
it is. And when you're dating, what are you doing? You're both putting your best foot forward.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then, it's not after you get married that you begin to see each other's, scars and
Yeah.
imperfections. And so, and it goes both ways. And so I think sometimes some things will happen in churches, and
Mm.
and it just gets us off. We didn't see it coming, and we're like, "Well, I'm done. That's just it,
Right.
and I'm gonna pack it up and leave. I'm not gonna do ministry anymore. I'm gonna go to a different church." not realizing the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and not realizing that sometimes God wants to now there are some situations I won't get into, and I know you've got you've got amazing ministry, Tom, that helps ministers through some of these challenging situations. But I think there are times that God uses these moments to prune, to refine you, to make you a better leader.
Yeah.
And we jump ship a little
Yep.
early,
Mm.
and we miss out on what God wanted to do in and through us, which in turn would have impacted, I think, your ministry at that place in a great way. And so, for some young leaders, I'm like, just hang in there. And I'm not talking about sticking through an abusive situation. So
Yep.
so please
Right.
don't go to the extreme of things.
Yeah.
But if you're ever thinking like, I don't know if I am in one or not, whatever, talk to Tom, talk to someone who's been in ministry for a long time, and I'm sure you'll figure it out. But so I would say, like, you need some grit, you need some of that Walt Disney grit in the beginning, and then find your Mickey Mouse, right? So Oswald is taken from Disney, and what did it do? Man, he just dug his heels in and had some grit and went in and eventually, it's a long story, but created Mickey Mouse, and obviously the rest is history, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot to the grit, innovation, and yeah, I don't know. I'll stick with those two things because I could go on, but
Well, I that was huge. I mean, seriously, Justin. I mean, and I hope regardless of, yeah, we framed it around newer leader, but I think any ministry leader needed to hear the truth of what he just said. Because you're right. I think there are a lot of leaders who miss out on seeing tremendously amazing things happen because they let one little thing or two little things that they think, you know, are the mountain when it really is the molehill, you know?
right. Yep.
Yeah, when Disney saw the property in Florida, he could have went, "Oh, well, this is just a bunch of swamp. Forget it. Let's just
Right.
go back to California. Never mind." That would have been a hundreds of $1 billion mistake, and yet ministry leaders are like, "Well, I don't have everything that the big church down the street has, and so woe is me. I'm not supported. My senior pastor hates me." And, you know, it's just like the silly videos I've seen on Instagram where, the dog is like, "My owner wants to kick me out. They don't love me anymore." And
Right.
that's not what I said. "Well, you told me I couldn't have my bone,"
Right.
and it's like, seriously. And that's the way some ministry leaders get. And so we miss the opportunity, and this is where I think some of the Kidmin trust comes in, because you do talk about in one of the chapters about modeling integrity and building character and building trust. And because kids need to know that they can trust us if they're going to
Mhm.
trust this God we're talking about, right? I think that's critical.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's where they learn. And especially if they're coming from a home where they're not sure they can trust the adults in the room,
Right.
it becomes even more critical. And so I liked how you on one trying to remember what day it was. I've got the page pulled up. It's like 60, 61, something like that. 62, where you're talking about the whole idea of building that culture of respect and trust and integrity. And I want you to talk about a little bit about that, because I do think some leaders struggle with this as well, because they don't stay long enough to build trust and integrity. And they often wonder, well, how am I supposed to get this with my senior leader? How does my senior leader, how do I get their trust so that they'll invest more in me and in the ministry? I I think this was an interesting chapter that, again, I don't necessarily know I've heard anybody really talk about this. So I wanted to highlight this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And yeah, I might go off a little bit. And just to be, I mean, perfectly clear. I mean, I've even not stuck in, I have not been at the same church, for 10, 20 years. I've got some friends who've done that. And the fruit that they've seen from sticking around is mind-boggling, and
Mm.
I would lie if I said I wasn't envious of it
Yep.
because,
Oh, me too.
it's just, I mean, to see some of the, to invest into a family and to see the spiritual growth and development that happens in their kids, and then, you're there long enough to where they get married, and then they have kids, and they're also, I mean, I'm just like, that's just gotta be so fulfilling
Yeah.
and absolutely amazing. But yeah, but I mean, building trust, I think it's all about consistency and just, yeah, and just being honest and open. And there's been times in my ministry which is, I'm sure, a conversation for another day where, I wasn't, and that definitely impacted
Mm,
relationships and how things went, and so but there's a lot of times where I was, and I think where people are, and I say consistency because I think they just wanna know, obviously, every church is different, and, whenever there's a leadership, change, upheaval, or whatever you wanna say, it always rocks the boat,
yeah.
and, families, they just wanna know, are you the real deal? Are you gonna show up?
Mhm.
And, do you mean what you say? And I think that your leader is asking the same thing. So
That's
so
good.
they both are, and I think so I think if you do those few things, I think you'll find yourself in a great position. You wanna build a relationship with your or trust with your leader. It's I mean, it's I would say, especially if you're starting off, I mean, be responsible. I mean, think of, what I would say are some, I wanna say no-brainer things, but I don't wanna offend people if it if you're like, I didn't realize that." But it's little things like, create a plan and follow through with your plan.
Yes.
It's communication. It's like, it's over communicate. It's when you say, "I'm gonna call you," you're gonna call them.
Mm,
When you say, "I'm gonna pray for you," and they can't see that you actually do pray for them. I mean, it's doing those things and then doing those things consistently. And so and over time, your leader, I mean, you're gonna build that trust within them. Some people are maybe a little like me. I'm more of a person who is like, you've got my trust. I've either, I've hired you or you're on my volunteer team or whatever. And the reason why you are is because I trust you. I wouldn't have asked you
yeah.
to be in this
Right.
role if I didn't have some sort of trust. And so you have it. Now it's up to you whether you keep it or not. And so
Mm,
I think there are leaders who are like that. And so you have to like unearn their trust.
right.
But not all leaders are like that. I know that sometimes you have to like, you have to earn it. And I go into every situation like I want to earn their trust. And so those are the types of things that I've done is I have just been consistent. And so over time they're like, okay, I can count on Justin because
Yeah.
he does what he says and he shows up. And not just in a physical sense, but in a yeah, just all in all ways he's there. So I think if you were to do that, be consistent, it goes a long way, and you'll find pretty quickly that you'll have families, you know, I wanna say eating out of the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
That sounds bad maybe, but you know what I mean? But I mean, they will. I mean,
But
they'll do
yeah.
anything for you because they
Right.
believe your leader will as well.
Yep. Yeah. If you're trustworthy in the little things, um, it, some people struggle with volunteers and keeping volunteers. One of the reasons why people lose volunteers is because they don't trust you anymore. You might overpromise and underdeliver or whatever. You cast a big vision, but yet the quality of excellence doesn't support that big
Right.
vision that you say you have. And that's a way to erode trust really quickly. And same with the senior leader. If you're not where you say you are, or you don't aim for the goals and well, even if you set goals and you don't even come close to them, yeah, you're gonna lose that. So as we're getting ready to close out here, I want to hit because you mentioned Marty Sklar and I love listening to interviews with Imagineers. I think McNair Wilson. And
Of
I've gotten a chance to rub shoulders with him and be in a room with him a couple of times, and I've gotten to walk the park a couple parks with him,
oh,
which
fun.
was insanely amazing to hear. I mean, he was one of the Imagineers that helped design the Tower of Terror, and he
Awesome.
was telling the story of how he was in the room and with all the big executives and how he did it, and literally taking a Kleenex, balling it up because they wanted to know, what does this ride do? And he held it up, and then he just dropped the Kleenex on the table, and he went, "We're
Right.
gonna take them up real high, and then we're just gonna drop them. In fact, we're probably gonna drop them twice. We're gonna make them think we dropped them, and then we're
Right.
gonna drop them again." And I think it was Michael Eisner, if I'm having the story right, asked, "Well, how many stories?" And he's like, "Well, 13." Because, of course, and just but
Right.
then to
Yeah.
also hear that, if you what you don't people don't realize is that the storytelling that goes on there at Disney, not only did they want this hotel and all this kind of stuff, but they also knew it was gonna be seen from a distance. And so
Yep.
if you go around and if you're in Epcot, you're in another country, and you're looking and you're actually seeing the back of the Tower of Terror, but it looks like the scenery from I can't remember which country it is. But anyway, I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, these Imagineers had this amazing creativity, and some people think, well, I'll never be able to do any of that stuff. And I like how you brought it out in the book and you shared some of the principles. I'm just wondering, can you pick one or two that if somebody, if for some sad reason they don't pick up this book, give them one or two nuggets, and maybe this will push them over the edge to go buy the book because I think it's worth it. So
Yeah, I think one of the ones that sticks out to me is Marty Sklar. I think it's the second commandment is wear your guest shoes. And I think it sounds like such an easy, I don't know. It sounds like it's such an easy thing, but I think it's something we don't do
mm,
enough of. And so what he's talking about is even one of the more famous stories, the Walt Disney stories, is Walt Disney was known to throw in a hat, and he would go stand in line at his park in Disneyland just because he wanted to hear what guests were saying. So he would
yeah,
stand in line of, think of those classic rides that I know that Disneyland still has, and he would just listen. Well, what are they saying? Are they are they bored? Are they excited? Are they whatever? And then he would take that information and he would talk to Imagineers, and they would do something with it. And
yeah,
so, man, maybe we need to add some more shade. Maybe we need to do this, tweak this, make this whatever. And so he was always in his guest shoes. And there's encouragement to, I think, when you're in ministry, that sometimes you just forget who we're serving, and sometimes I think
yeah.
we unintentionally
Ooh,
serve or start serving ourselves. We might serve our so what I mean by that is, like, we might start serving our own ideas, our own thoughts, and we're not in our guest shoes. And so I know over the years what I've done is I've had families in our church, that I've said, "Hey, what I'd love for you to do is, I have a relationship with them, is like, I'm gonna put you on a mission. And I want you just to do what Walt Disney did. I want you to go stand in line, dropping kids off. I want you just to listen. I want you to walk around with fresh eyes and just, what do you see? What's going on that you feel like we could do better on?" I've done this a couple times with some brand new families. So new to the church, and I've asked them. So you have to do this the right way. I don't
yeah.
I wouldn't recommend you just do all these new families, but there are a couple new families that I don't know, I just felt comfortable with. I said, "Hey,
Mhm.
this is who I am, and I would love if it's okay to just connect with you for 10 minutes after the service. I know it's your first time. Hey, if it's a church I was working at, we had coffee. I was like, hey, let me grab you coffee. And I just want to talk to you about your experience. So as you're dropping your kid
Yes.
off for the very first time here,
Yep.
just pay attention to, I mean, I just love for you just to pay attention to some things, and let's connect." Those were some of those eye-opening moments for me
Oh,
because,
man.
it
Yes.
allowed me to see through their eyes a little bit of really, what does a first-time guest feel and see, and what is their sense as they're going through our space, which is super valuable. We were able to make some decisions based off of that. But then
Yes.
2, I would try to, so I've done that, but then 2, kinda going back to wear your guest shoes, is I would try, 'cause it's hard when you're in it for a lot of years. It's hard to, put on the shoes of a first-time guest, or put on the
Yep.
shoes of a child.
Oh,
But the reality is you've gotta try, you have to do that. You have to force yourself to do that at times, and just don't, take off your "I'm the boss" hat, and put on your, "Man, would I attend your" hat if I wasn't being paid?
Mm.
Would I would I have a good experience? And be okay with you going through a service and being like, "Oh my goodness, we're doing a great job, and this is awesome." Or be okay with sitting through one of your experiences and thinking, "Oh my goodness, we've
Yeah.
got to make some changes. This is not this is not good. We're not connecting." Or, "I can't believe this is as messy," or, "We're not as clear on communicating this part." Be okay with that, and just but go through your guest shoes. So I think that's a huge
Wow.
one
That's a big
that'll,
one.
I think, would change some of your thinking. And then another one would be, and I had a friend look through this and help me edit it because I used the word too much. So if you're a junior hire, but the fourth one, it says that, Marty Sklar's thing is create a weenie. And I had someone look at the chapters like, "Justin, what in the world are you talking about?" I'm like, "Hear me out. For one, I didn't come up with the term, okay?" And really what it was Walt Disney had this thing of where a weenie is in a hot dog. And what it was when he said, like, create a weenie, it was something that drew people in, and so here was this hot dog stand at the end of Main Street USA
Yep.
that would draw people in, draw people's attention, or the weenie at Walt Disney World, at the Magic Kingdom, or at Disneyland. Really, it's the castle, right? That is the thing that
Yep.
draws
Yep.
people in, and so when you
Yep.
see it draws you and you wanna walk that way, and so I would say, what is that thing in your ministry that draws people to your ministry? And it can literally be something, I mean, if you wanted to, it could be something physical, but I'm not necessarily talking about something physical. It is, I mean, what are you known for? Is it like, are you a minister that really cares and loves families, like, loves kids? Is it a real like, maybe the weenie at your church that then draws them in, it's the focal point, is that you are a church that, man, you just meet the needs of your community. I mean, stuff
Yep.
happens in your community,
Yep.
and you're known as the ministry that just goes out there and, man, you're clothing those kids, you're finding, those school backpacks, at the beginning of school and throughout the school year, and you're adopting
Yes.
that school that, man, just needs help because they're underfunded. Just what is it that you're known for? Maybe you're
Mm.
strong on just, biblical, solid biblical teaching, and that's the thing that
Yeah.
draws people in because you're a safe place for those families. They know that when they drop their kids off, that they're gonna be discipled well in that
Oh,
faith
that's
community, and
good.
so those are probably, like, 2 of my favorite ones I think of, and it could be something physical as well, that focal point. It could be,
Yep.
man, you're just that church that just is really cool in the fact that, I mean, it just draws people in who would not go to church. They would not go to a
Yep.
traditional church, even though your church is great. It kinda's got some of those traditional vibes
Yep.
to it, and unfortunately, it wouldn't attract a certain kind of people, but maybe your church just has this, and you might think it's just, the frosting on a cake, and maybe it is, but it just might have that look and that feel. I think that's okay. It gets people into church, into a place where they would never go, and then now it's up to you to not just be the frosting, but, man, but you're also the substance and everything
Yes.
underneath that. So,
Yes. Yep.
sorry, just rambling there.
That's no, nuh because that I mean, I heard McNair talk about that term because that's what the Tower of Terror is at Hollywood Studios.
Yep,
That's what the Chinese theater is when you walk into Hollywood Studios, is you've got those focal points that at the end that draw you there.
yep,
And so, yeah, every leader could ask, "What draws people to our church?" And when they come in, then what do they experience? I tell leaders, "Get down on your knees and what do you see when you walk in the door? Because that's what a
yes,
kid's gonna see. So get down on their level and then go take a big sniff down your hallways.
yes, please.
Because if it doesn't pass the view test and the smell test, you're in trouble.
Right.
Just saying. You can you can have the big $1,000,000 playground, but if it stinks in there, it smells like dirty diapers in the ball pit, they're not coming back.
Exactly, yeah, or if there's little substance. I mean, if you just have that, you're gonna keep them for a time,
Yep.
but you're gonna struggle, you're gonna, yeah, have those conversations of, "I wish there was something deeper," or they're not finding
Yep.
relationships. So,
There
there's
you
just so
go.
much more to it. So, there's nothing wrong with having those cool, expensive, things, whatever it
Sure.
is, but you just better have something to back it up with.
Exactly, exactly. And it doesn't take the big fancy stuff because if you go to the simplest
Exactly.
things and you've got great people who love kids and who create a welcoming environment with smiles on their faces and they're all happy to be there and they engage your kid from the moment they walk in the door. Oh yeah.
Yep, I'll
They're
take that over the shiny toy any
I
day.
will take
And
that all day
honestly,
all day.
a lot of younger families will take that as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. Totally agree. All right. Gotta ask this question as we wrap up. What's one of your big takeaways from the book, and how's it impacted you?
Yeah, I think that I have such an appreciation for storytelling, and again, that's woven through, the
Yeah,
book a lot. I really enjoyed towards the end of the book, there's a couple interviews that I recorded down and put in here with a marketeer or an Imagineer who were heavily involved with the Disney company. And so one of my takeaways, is one is like, I think people, they think of the Walt Disney Company, they think, you know, anti-Jesus, or they're not Christian friendly. And I'm constantly surprised of, like, you'd be surprised how many people of faith are involved in the company. making decisions, doing
Yeah.
so, doing some things, redeeming storytelling that's making a difference. And so throughout the book, I'm inspired to tell the story of Jesus, which is why we're here. I know this sounds maybe corny or
Yeah.
whatever, but
Uh-uh.
but it's just true. I want to tell his story better, and that means in the words that I say, in how I represent him,
Mm.
in how I present myself, in the things that I create, the things that I
Yes.
teach. I'm inspired to be a better storyteller. And
Oh, that's
I
good.
may not be the best orator, in front of a microphone, but storytelling is so much more than that. It's not
Oh,
just about
yeah.
opening up a book and reading a
Yep.
story.
Yep.
Storytelling is ingrained in everything that we do. In fact, and I'm sure there'll be one more Disney book, in a couple of years to complete the trifecta, but because I wanna hone in on the storytelling aspect of it, I wanna pull it out. But I mean, it was I
Oh,
enjoyed the interviews with the people I interviewed. I enjoyed all the articles that I've read, and I just wanna be even a better storyteller.
cool. All right. So where, Justin, can people find the book? Because we'll put the link in the show notes as well. But where can they find the book and get it on order?
Yeah, I mean, easiest way to find it is on Amazon. So, search for, my name, Justin with a Y, Justyn Smith, or look for the book, Kidmin Trust and Pixie Dust is the easiest way. Man, if people wanted to do a bulk order, they could contact me directly at Justin
Mhm.
at justynsmith.com. And I'd be more than happy to work a deal to get them in bulk for teams if that's what they'd like.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will put that in the show notes so that people can get at that if they want to. And because I definitely would recommend picking up a copy, guys, read it with your teams, go through the questions, work it through because there's some really good stuff. And we'll put links to the company that Justin's working with as well in the show notes. So if your church is interested in getting some help in storytelling and figuring out what do we want to be known for? I would encourage you to have a conversation with Justin, jump into a coaching call with him or whatever. And, I just think it'd be great. But this book will be a good catalyst for it,
Yeah.
for sure. So, man, thanks for the time today. We've been talking a long time,
Yeah, we
but
have,
it
yeah.
sure has been good catching up.
Yeah, I appreciate Tom, and no, I just appreciate your ministry and just what you've done. You're a seasoned leader who's just shown yourself time and time again to come through, and yeah, I'm just excited for all that God's doing through you, through this, and through your future. So thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward just to hanging out.
Yeah. Well, me too. Me too. We will do this again soon. All right, my friends. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. Again, if there's anything that we can do to serve you, please reach out. Don't hesitate. If you haven't joined the Kid Ministry Collective community, come join us on Facebook. Just remember to answer all the questions because we do take that seriously to let people in. And I just denied 3 more people today because they didn't answer the questions. And I sent them messages because I try to communicate. But we're not just trying to gatekeep. We really do care about the community, want to keep it safe and productive for everybody. But God bless you. Thanks for listening. If you leave us a review or send us a takeaway, we would love to hear about those things. And go pick up the book and stay tuned for another episode real soon. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Kids Ministry Collective podcast. We hope that it's helped and encouraged you. If you would support our podcast by continuing to share it with other leaders, and if you haven't already, hey, please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. We look forward to hearing from you how this podcast has helped and sharpened your skills in ministries. So let us know on your Facebook page or head over to kmccoach.net and share with us there. And thanks again for listening to the Kid Ministry Collective podcast.